Thank you for joining us today for part one of our two-part series as we take a deeper look at anxiety disorders. If you're listening now, welcome. My name is Tiffany. I am a licensed mental health counselor here with my friend Kirk.
Hello, Kirk Fasshauer, Director of Crisis Response Services at Peace River Center and a licensed clinical social worker.
So Kirk and I get together and we talk about mental health and stigma and all of the barriers and also resources to help our community feel safer and have a better understanding of mental health. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about anxiety disorders and talking specifically about practical ways to help support someone who might be experiencing high levels of anxiety.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways to maybe help someone who is experiencing anxiety, but to better understand how to start, it's important to know what is the difference between stress and anxiety. And I think that we've talked about this before in other episodes, but it's one of those points where you can't really talk about it enough because everyone experiences highs, everyone experiences lows, and it's important to understand there's an element of normal to this, but then there's also a very clear line where it becomes abnormal and even harmful. So when we think about stress, Kirk, what are some ways where you feel like you see something, being, different, stress versus anxiety?
So the stress is those elements that move us forward. You can have good stress, you can have bad stress. And you can have what's referred to as imagined stress, and that's sometimes I think that's worse because your imagination runs away with the whole topic, and sometimes we get into what is referred to as catastrophizing. We think of the worst part, and then that leads to more irrational thought processes, more excessive guilt, more excessive worry, and that's where you start to get into anxiety.
Well, and right there, I think it's important to understand, whenever I think of stress versus anxiety, what is this? What is the cause? What is the start of it? And so what I typically see when you're looking at stress, it's typically a response to an external cause, right? So maybe there's a big test, or maybe you have an argument with a friend, versus anxiety, where a lot of times it's an internal response to whatever the stress is. So this is the stress, the test, and anxiety is my internal response. And so there is stress, but then anxiety is kind of what is maybe sometimes the reaction of the stress.
Yes, okay.
One of the things that I also notice sometimes is that just with general stress, it tends to resolve when the situation resolves. So when the test has concluded, okay, that anxiety related to the stress is gone.
Good point. Yes,
right?
The stress is often very specific to a situation where the anxiety can be much more generalized. There are some parts of anxiety that can be situation specific, and those are much more in the phobia realm like we talked about. But
and it tends to hover.
It hovers. It stays. It's like that cloak you can't ever get rid of. And it's a heavy cloak. It's weighted and can weigh you down. So, and it's even after the immediate situation is gone, it's still there. It's constant. And so that excessive worry, that uneasiness or tension, it's something that falls into the realm of both stress and anxiety. But you're right. Anxiety is much more of an internal process that lingers as a result. So,
and you say all the time, live, laugh, learn, and love. I think that one of the big things to understand, so you're going to have stress. That's just a part of life. But with anxiety, even with the situation, tends to resolve, it's still there. It's still hovering. It seems to always be present, but it's interfering with your everyday life in a way that sometimes even causes you to avoid things that without that anxiety, you might really enjoy doing.
Right, exactly. So something might start off as being stressful, and it can, depending on the outcome, it can create that anxiety. So public speaking, for example, you may be excited, and it's the first time. It's nerve-wracking, and it can raise a lot of stress. And you get out there and you do it, and then you have a moment where it's blocked. So then that turns into anxiety. So if you get even think about the situation, all those feelings come rushing back, even when you're in a safe environment. You're asked to speak again publicly. All those emotions and feelings come back to you of being in that moment. So what was once something that was stressful now has become something that's more anxious and anxiety provoking.
Well, I remember pretty vividly learning to drive a car.
Right.
Right. And so, like, there is a point in your life where you have never driven a car before, right? Like, you don't know how. And you learn. And even though you've learned, maybe you've had your permit for a year or however long you've had your permit, even then, I remember whenever I went to take my test, I have the person sitting in the car or in the seat next to me, and I knew what to do. I knew all of the things, but I was so anxious and
Right.
so nervous. I'm like, they're judging me. Like, they're going to know I'm nervous. And now I'll get in a car and I'll drive, and I don't think anything of
Don't
it.
think about
right?
it at all, right?
Even I can remember whenever vividly, so the DMV where I was, it was, off the beaten path. I come from the country, and you had to pull out of the DMV parking lot onto a state road.
Ooh.
And then, because there was one road, and, you went down it for a little while. And I remember sitting there waiting to pull out and having a moment of, okay, how much pressure do I put on the gas? If I put too much, she's going to mark me wrong. If I don't put enough, it's going to be another situation. And I remember just the panic of like, how hard do I press it? And I knew how hard, but I was over analyzing every moment, every reaction. And now it's second nature.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I think sometimes with stress, once the situation concludes, like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But with anxiety, it's harder to shake. And so I think for a lot of people, it would be so helpful in those moments of, I know I'm not okay. I know I need to somehow regulate, but how do I? And so for a lot of people, what's really helpful is something called self-monitoring. And when we think of self-monitoring, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's monitoring yourself during the day, during a situation to where you're in tune with, I'm starting to feel a little jittery. I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed. And then you do kind of self-check-ins of, okay, did I eat lunch today? Did I eat breakfast? Have I been sitting for too long? And so you kind of start to, self,
Right.
monitor yourself.
So with self-monitoring, when we've talked about this, and I talk with clients about it as well, one of the first things I like to do is, people, not everybody is very in tune with their body. So I like to talk to them about doing a body scan. You've got to, it's something you have to practice. Stop for a moment, and you have to have some time set aside to do this, where you've got to stop for a moment, be someplace where there's low stimuli, and just listen to your body, listen to your breathing, listen to your heartbeat. Just kind of, where is that tension? Just listen. Just be still for a moment, just to start to practice that process. And it's something you have to practice if you're not used to it. Because like I said, some people just are not that in tune. So you want them to take a moment and be in that moment to think about, okay, not so much thoughts. It's right now we're not even dealing with the thoughts. It's just being in tune with your body so that you can take that self-measure and start to understand, okay, I can put your hand on your heart and just feel it beating for a few minutes. Listen to your breathing, and then slowly start to take some deep breaths so that you can even help yourself relax even more, and just go down to your toe, with muscle relaxation techniques that we talk about. It's some of that, but it's not to that level yet. It's just a moment of, okay, wiggle your toes a little bit, move your ankle, move your legs. What does that feel? What's that like? Just to begin that process for somebody to do a self-monitoring so they can do a body check. Because once you know what your body does on a regular basis, now you can say, oh, that's not right. Something's not right here. I feel it right here in my shoulder. Well, what is it? And that's where the monitoring comes in.
Well, and I think it's so interesting that you talk about kind of being still because so many times we're in a perpetual state of really overstimulation. I mean, I
Yes.
think about when I wake up in the morning, what's the first thing I do? I grab my phone and I turn off my alarm, right? And if I'm being honest, I check my email, right?
Right.
But
Right.
before I even brush my teeth, and I'm going through the day, and if I'm really being honest, the entire day, I'm constantly stimulated. People are asking questions, or I'm solving problems, or I'm dealing with technology, or it's go, 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 go. And there is an adrenaline that's associated with like helping you get through the day. But it's really hard to think, okay, I'll do that body scan, I'll do that self monitoring when I have a minute. You're not going to get a minute.
Right. Right.
You're constantly overstimulated, and I think sometimes we don't make it a priority to allow ourselves to not be overstimulated because there's this sense of you have to be productive. You have to get
Correct.
things done.
Yes. Yes. That is our society. We got. If you're not going and feeling a lot of stress, you're not productive. It's like, whoa, time out. Time out.
Well, and I think sometimes there's this sense of I'm going to fail or, I'm overwhelmed, so I have to accomplish this. And there's this priority that's associated with like achieving something tangible, but there's not so much a priority on regulating so you can maintain that productivity. It's a balance. And I think we put so much emphasis on, well, what have you achieved, but not on, well, what actually do you need to be able to achieve? You need to sleep.
Right.
You need to
Well,
eat.
need sleep, eat, and relationships. What is the sacrifice by that kind of mentality? What is the sacrifice? What have we lost as a result of having that mindset of go, go, go? And it's difficult to have a relationship if you've got that mindset of go, 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 overstimulation, gotta move, gotta move, gotta move. And I think you're right. What is it? What did it take to get that achievement? Yes, it's an accomplishment, and you should feel good about it. Don't mistake us trying to tell you you should feel guilty about that. But take a step back because you want to replicate that.
What do you need
What
to
do you
be in a
need?
state of balance? And even, so as a professional, so, moving past college, going into your career,
Right.
I think there's that level of one of the things that you and I see a lot is this, influx of people who, come into the field wanting to do the work and wanting to do things well and to the best of their ability and all the compassion and all the good things. But then there's this compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma and burnout that happens. And I think it's because there's so much emphasis, even internally, on what can I achieve and not on what do I need to thrive. Right.
Correct.
And there has to be a balance. It's an equilibrium. And so, like, sometimes we have these lofty ideas of, oh, I need to do all of these grounding techniques and, oh, I need to do, this and that. You also need to sleep.
Right.
You also
Right.
need to eat a balanced meal. You also need to be able to have conversations with people that bring you joy, that fill you back up. So it's not necessarily all of these complex, intricate techniques. Sometimes it's just giving yourself space
Exactly.
to be a human.
That moment. One of the things. So we talk about achieving and all this. And it's good to have a career. Nothing wrong with that. But one of the things you want to do is this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. So to do a marathon, you do have to pace out your strategy to finish the marathon. Especially if you want to be in the top area, you've got to take care of yourself in this process. So I do crisis work. I've been doing crisis work the majority of my career, and 35 plus years of doing mental health work. Been with Peace River Center for 23 years, specifically doing crisis work. You can't do crisis work that long without doing something to take care of yourself, taking those moments to take a step back. Now, and totally honest here, is not every day that you're able to take that step back, do that self-scan. And there are days where you miss those moments of self-care and you get roar in somebody's face. That happens. That is, hello, being human. Welcome to the human condition. But to do it for the long term, you do have to have those things where you take your breaks, you take moments, and even to this day, I'm trying out different things to, you know, let's try something different because the old coping is it's wearing out. It's not doing its thing anymore. So I try something different. And one of the things I did in the last 18 months it's been. Last 18 months I've always tested out journaling. I wasn't really ever good at journaling, whatever that means. And it wasn't working for me for the longest time. And then recently it started to fall into place. So I got into bullet journaling, and there's a whole specific structure to bullet journals and all of this. And bulletjournal.com is out there. It's really good. Writer does a nice job of presenting his whole process with this. And for him, it was about what it ultimately is for him was about centering and getting things in a very busy world under control. And that is one of the things we do encourage people who can and enjoy journaling is to journal to help center yourself and kind of focus for the day. And that's what I do every morning. Not every morning. Sorry. Let me take that generalization back. There are some mornings I miss that, and I can tell when I've missed that because I start to feel that rush of anxiety again. So how do I get that back under control? I take a moment and I create my journal. It's not a digital journal. It's an analog journal. And some people say, oh, you can do that on your Outlook. You can do that on the computer. And I'm like, that's not the point. The point is the whole mechanism of stopping for a moment and taking the pen and writing out the lines and being methodical with that whole process is centering, it's grounding, it's
Well, and I
nice.
think that the wisdom in what you just shared is that it's not even so much about the end result, it's about the process.
Correct.
Right? It's about the journey. And it
Correct.
sounds like cheesy even sometimes to say it that way, but it's true. It's about finding a process to regulate, finding a process to manage your ups and downs because you're going to have ups and downs.
Yep.
And I know with anxiety, there's lots of resources, there's lots of different techniques. And the trick is understanding that they're all not going to work for you. Like some will, some won't. And keeping on moving forward and trying until you find the ones that are right for you. I'm terrible at journaling because it creates a domino effect of I have the best intentions, right? I buy the
Right.
prettiest journals,
Yeah.
and then I will do really good for a week. And then I will forget or get busy or be tired and then beat myself up in my mind for
missing out.
I missed
Exactly.
out. So then what was meant to be helpful starts to become harmful.
Exactly. And that's what it was like for me too. For the longest time, same thing. And you go on YouTube and you look at the different bullet journals that people have. The real essence of bullet journaling is the simplicity of it, but people have made it complicated, and they're creative outlets and they do beautiful journals, and you look at that and you go, man, that's just way too much. And it will scare you away. But if you go to the essence, for me, the essence of what it was, it's real minimalist, and it doesn't have to be super complicated. And what I like about writer, I forget writer's last name, but he's the gentleman that really moved bullet journaling. He stresses, this is your journal. It can be as complicated or as simple as you want.
Yeah.
But here's a structure that worked for him. And he said, and he's found that structure, that process has helped many others. And that's why it's become such a big thing.
That's really good. And going back to our stress versus anxiety, I think that's such a good mental picture of, so with stress, you have a specific event that you do need to be productive in order to accomplish whatever is in front of you, to have a conclusion to that event, because there is such a thing as, positive stress, that motivation to get the job done. Whereas with anxiety, I think it's not even so much about the productivity because there's not going to be a line that you cross where I've done it.
Right.
Right? With anxiety, I think it's more of the process of how do I learn how to regulate because of this marathon. That even if I do all of the things, if I'm not regulating, that weight is still going to be there. So I'm never going to outrun that weight until I learn how to process what's causing the weight to be there in the first place. So moving on to different types of techniques. So we talked about journaling.
Yeah.
We talked about body scans. We've talked about self-monitoring. There are many, many, many. A couple
Absolutely.
that we're going to focus on right now is one, it's called staying in your time zone. And so what that basically means is, there's a world of anxiety out there, and, we could really get caught up in what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next year, what's going to happen 10 years from now. But I think in this moment, when we're experiencing distress, keeping ourselves in this moment of what is happening right now?
Right.
Am I safe right now? Is there something that I need to do right now? Because, the weight of the world is waiting for you tomorrow, but right now, what do you have the power to do? And I think that gives you permission to let go of future stress.
Absolutely. Because we don't know what's coming in the future. Okay. We have ideas of what it might look like. There's just so many variables. The past has already happened. Can't fix that. We don't have time machines to go back, But the whole point of being present, that's why it's called the present, is this is a gift to you at that moment. So if you can take that time to stay in your lane, stay in your time zone, is where are you at right now, this moment? Are you safe? What's happening at this point in time? And it begins to help, center yourself for everything else and start to get in touch with those triggers that bring on the anxiety. Thank you for joining us. If you or someone you know is struggling with any anxiety disorders or any other mental health issues, here in Central Florida, you can call us at 863-519-3744. Or if you're listening to us from other areas in our nation, you can dial the national number 988.